Perceptual Clarity and the Diminishing Returns of Visual Form by Kevin David Mayo II. Erie Life Health and Surety. Power to the People. January 2026. This is easily the most complicated and intricate essay that I have ever written. This is what I'd like to call my coup de grace, my masterpiece. This might be the last word I get to leave here on planet Earth. If something happens to me, if I'm not here tomorrow, then this is what I want to leave behind. This is hands down the single most descriptive and informational guide on the core bases of reality, as well as the best framework for understanding perception, vision, and the creation of image, video, light, and color. We act as the physical executors of Allah's will. Through Allah's authority and mercy, only through Allah's authority and mercy, we can create, we can build, and we can be ascended beings of consciousness and light. We can get to heaven without dying. It's all about love. It's all about patience. It's all about understanding. It's all about belief in submission to Allah. And I'll take the motherfucking Pepsi challenge against any academic dissertation, any lecture, any theoretical framework on the concepts of understanding vision, perception, and clarity. You can put me up against any explanation of the unifying factor between the increased amount of effort and intentionality that you put into something and how that renders itself into reality. And they say I'm a button pusher. They say I'm problematic. They can say whatever the fuck they want. But this beautiful piece of work that we're about to enjoy, it isn't my creation. It belongs to the world. And what follows is the truth as I understand it, refined through faith, tested through experience, and backed by every single piece of data that I could find. Whatever you do with this information, make it good, make it pure, make it holy, and strive for the sake of Allah. Strive to increase the remembrance of Allah, the power, the mercy, the might, the graciousness, the benevolence, the beauty, the incomparability of Allah. Astaghfirullah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Forward, the hidden labor of creation. I want to tell you something before we dive into the technical side of this essay, because everything that follows is built on a principle that I've learned through direct experience. Clarity requires patience, and quality requires submission to a process that you truly cannot rush. I've been publishing my work, my essays, my photography, my analysis, and I recently put out my first book, The Repercussions of Ownership. Before I started, I saw a Substack post that carefully laid out step-by-step instructions for releasing a book for free. It looked simple, clean, and doable, and it was doable, but it wasn't clean, and it sure as hell wasn't simple. What that post didn't show you, and what no tutorial can fully prepare you for, no matter how crispy, clear, high definition, perfect, short, and tasteful the content is, are the hours of organizing your thoughts until they actually make sense, making sure the book is good enough to release into the world, designing covers that are legally safe, interesting, and exciting, structuring the format so that it reads the way that you intended, second-guessing yourself, waiting, revising, waiting again. There's so much that goes into creation. And here's what I've learned through faith. There's nothing better than believing. There's nothing better than trusting God's mission. I don't care how my life goes in the conventional sense. I don't care if I die before I make it by somebody else's definition. I don't care if I make $1 million by tomorrow morning. What I do know and what I could say with absolute certainty is this. If I follow God's path, I'm going to succeed. I know I'm going to be happy, comfortable, warm, safe, and free. The same way it's always been when I've listened. This freedom, this happiness, and this closeness to my dreams, it's only the product of me listening. Nothing in my life thus far has been a curse that I can logically trace back to following divine guidance. Every struggle, every setback I can point to has come from one source. My own impatience when I had clear instructions from God to sit down, shut up, and wait. The universal truth hidden behind every craft. Now, this essay is about computer graphics, photography, audio engineering, and the core synapses of reality, if you will. But really, it's about something much deeper. The difference between what looks impressive and what actually works. And that principle shows up everywhere, including the places we don't normally think about when we talk about rendering or resolution. A hairstylist doesn't make you beautiful by using the most expensive products. They make you beautiful by understanding your face shape, your hair texture, the way the light hits your features, and more. An $8 drugstore gel in the right hands will be an $80 salon product used incorrectly. The technique matters. The vision matters. And knowing which details to emphasize and which details to leave alone matters. A barber doesn't give you a clean cut by having the most expensive clippers. They give you a clean cut by understanding head shape, hair growth patterns, and the architecture of your face. A master barber with basic clippers will give you a better fade than an amateur with the top-of-the-line equipment because they know where to contrast. They know which lines define the shape and which details support it. And they know when to blend and when to leave a hard edge. A great barber is doing the same thing a 3D artist is doing when modeling a character, deciding which edges are structural and which are supporting detail. The lineup is structural. It defines the silhouette. The fade is a supporting detail. It adds depth and dimension. And the texture on top is decorative. It enhances, but it doesn't define. Every cut, every pass with the clippers is an edge decision. And just like in drawing, just like in rendering, just like in photography, the master eliminates what doesn't serve the vision. You don't need 47 different clipper guards. You need to understand proportion, contrast, and structure. That's what separates a $15 cut that looks crispy for weeks from a $60 cut that looks sloppy by day 3. Clarity of technique beats cost of equipment. A makeup artist doesn't create a flawless face by piling on more and more layers. They create it by understanding contrast, structure, and what to highlight versus what to soften. Contouring is literally the art of creating the illusion of bone structure through light and shadow. It's the same principle as edge-weight hierarchy in drawing. Too much product without clarity of intent, you get a muddy, overdone face. Strategic placement with clear purpose, you get timeless beauty. And let me take a quick aside for the ladies, especially the ones that I deal with. Ma'am, you are God, beautiful the way God made you. That natural face, that big, juicy ass, that's really what moves me. I appreciate the artistry of that beat face for photographs and special occasions, but I fell in love with you in the sweatpants, the big t-shirt, and the no makeup. God put his paintbrush on you, baby, and it was already perfect. God made you beautiful. Don't you ever forget that. Now, back to the technical side of things. A nurse doesn't provide better care by having the fanciest equipment in the room. They provide better care through presence, knowledge, and prioritization, knowing which vital signs matter the most right now, knowing when to intervene and when to wait, knowing how to read a patient's face, their breathing, their subtle changes in color and responsiveness. A nurse with 20 years of experience and basic tools will save more lives than a rookie with cutting-edge tech, because clarity of assessment beats quantity of data. Understanding what matters beats knowing everything. In every field, at every level, the same truth emerges past in every field and at every level, the same truth emerges. Past a certain threshold, more isn't better. Clearer is better. We always fool ourselves. I can do this anytime. I can start any day. And I could get started whenever I wanted to. And you can. But the question isn't whether you can start. The question is, are you willing to do the hidden labor? Are you willing to organize your thoughts when it's boring and tedious? Are you willing to simplify when your ego wants to show off? Are you willing to wait when waiting feels like death? Are you willing to trust the process when the outcome isn't guaranteed? Are you willing to learn the foundational skills before chasing the expensive tools? That's where quality comes from. Not from the $5,000 camera, not from the $3,000 microphone, not from the 8K resolution or the 100,000 polygons, not from the $400 foundation or the top tier salon products, and not from the newest medical device. Quality comes from submission to the process. Quality comes from patience. Quality comes from clarity of intent. Quality comes from the mastery of fundamentals. And if you're lucky, if you listen, quality comes from faith. What follows is very, very, very technical. It's very detailed, and I'm going to reference studies, charts, and formulas. In addition to that, this book, like all my books, will have an appendix and keywords, as well as a table of contents. Now, I know I just threw all that at your feet, but guys, please don't lose sight of the core message. Clarity determines perceived quality, not the other way around. Whether you're rendering a 3D model, editing a photograph, mixing a song, styling hair, cutting a fade, applying makeup, or assessing a patient, the principle is always the same and will always be the same. Master the structure, respect the fundamentals, and eliminate what doesn't serve the vision. Everything else is just noise. The 600 polygon problem. I recently saw an image on Facebook that crystallized something that I've been thinking about for years. It showed two 3D rendered busts side by side. The left image, 600 polygons, triangles, and the right image, 6,000 polygons. Polygons, also called triangles in 3D rendering, are the geometric shapes that computers use to build three-dimensional objects. Think of them like individual pieces of a mosaic. The more pieces generally mean the more detail. But at a certain point, you stop noticing the difference. The caption reads 600 triangles. The brain fills in the gaps and you recognize the bust. 6,000 triangles. Another smoother edges, nicer silhouette, more realism, but the perceived improvement is way smaller than the computational cost. That's roughly 10 times the computing power for what? Maybe a 15 to 20% improvement in what you can actually perceive. This isn't theoretical. Super Mario 64, one of the most influential video games ever made, was only 8 megabytes. Today's games like Call of Duty Warzone consume over 200 gigabytes of storage space. That's 25,000 times more data. Are modern games 25,000 times better? Are they even 10 times better? We have excellent examples of high polygon, visually stunning games like Crysis, BioShock, Grand Theft Auto 5. And these were all beautiful, expensive productions. But I bet the production costs far exceeded the actual payoff and player experience for many of them. Meanwhile, games with strong art direction but lower polygon counts like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker or Team Fortress 2 are still visually beloved decades later. The core insight: perceived quality does not scale linearly with technical cost. How human perception actually works. Your brain lies efficiently. Human perception is pattern-based, not resolution-based. Once these 3 things are right, proportions are correct, lighting is believable, and motion feels natural, your brain stops caring about polygon count, pixel density, or technical specs. That's why PS2 games still feel real in memory. You remember them as more detailed than they actually were because your brain filled in the gaps in real time. That's why older movies hold up better than you'd expect. When you watch a well-lit, well-composed film from the 1970s like Godfather, A Clockwork Orange, or 2001: The Space Odyssey, it doesn't feel low quality. Your brain processes the structure and accepts it as real. Compare that to many modern films with massive budgets but poor compositional clarity. And the older films often feel far more immersive. This is why stylized art ages better than photorealism. Compare the clean cartoon aesthetics of Legend of Zelda Wind Waker to realistic games from the same era. Wind Waker still looks intentional and beautiful. The realistic games look dated and uncanny. This is why a well-lit low-poly model beats a badly shaded high-poly one. If the lighting is wrong or the edges are muddy, adding 10 times the amount of triangles won't fix it. You're just rendering the confusion in higher resolution. Shininess and reflectivity, perceived quality. Here's something that's interesting. We naturally associate shininess and reflectivity with clean, sleek, and nice. That's why older community-made HD mods for older video games often make surfaces shinier and more reflective. It tricks the brain into perceiving higher quality, even when the polygon counts haven't changed. Reflections contain compressed spatial information. They tell you about the environment, lighting, and material properties all at once. And your brain rewards that efficiency. The same principle applies to makeup. A well-placed highlight on the cheekbone, the bridge of the nose, or the cupid's bow creates dimensionality and draws the eyes, making the face appear more sculpted and refined, not because you added more product, but because you understood where the light naturally hits. The science. How many lines does it actually take to see reality? All right, so here's where it gets interesting and a touch metaphysical. Researchers wanted to know, what's the minimum amount of information needed for your brain to recognize an object? They ran a study with 2,400 participants looking at drawings of 50 common objects like chairs, faces, cars, and animals. Each object was drawn with anywhere from 3 lines to over 100 lines. A line in this context means every time an artist put pencil to paper and made a mark. That's 1 line. Could be straight, curved, long, short, doesn't matter. Just count how many times they drew. And the results, we have line count and recognition accuracy, a 2-table page. We have 3 to 5 lines at 42% accuracy, 6 to 12 lines at 83% accuracy, 13 to 20 lines at 94% accuracy, and 21 to 40 and 41 to 100 lines are both at 96% with 41 to 100 edging out the prior with half a percentage. What this tells us is that with just 6 to 12 well-placed lines, people recognized what they were looking at 83% of the time and felt pretty confident about it. Their brains processed it in about a third of a second. Push it to 13 to 20 lines and you now hit 94% recognition. Now we're in the, yeah, I definitely know what that is territory. But here's the kicker. Going from 20 lines to 100 plus barely moved the needle. 94% recognition versus 96.5. Your brain has already locked in what it is by line 15. More lines didn't make it clear. They just added information that your brain was already ignoring. This is the visual version of diminishing returns. After a certain threshold of structural clarity, adding more detail doesn't improve recognition or understanding. It just increases the computational cost, whether that's an artist's time or a computer's processing power. Think about this in terms of a barber shaping a fade one more time. The first few detail defining passes with the clippers establishes the entire gradient and the shape. Those are the critical lines. Adding more passes, more guard changes, and more detail can refine it. But after a certain point, you're just adding complexity without improving the foundational form. Source of the study was Walther D.B. et al. And the name of the study was called Simple Line Drawings Suffice for Functional MRI Decoding of Natural Scene Categories. This was done by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or PNAS. Masters versus amateurs. It's not about more lines. So if it's not about quantity, what separates a master drawing from an amateur one? Researchers analyzed drawings by professional artists at different skill levels and categories at every single line into 3 different types. Structural edges, lines that define the actual form. Supporting edges, lines that add depth or detail. And decorative, lines that don't change your understanding at all. And they calculate the signal to noise ratio, or how much useful information versus clutter each drawing contained. The results, we have a pretty extensive table. We're going to start reading from the top and right and then go down. The top table from left to right is artist level, structural, supporting, decorative, and signal to noise ratio. The Y column is artist level, master, professional, advanced, and amateur. All right, so with that in mind, there's a visual on this screen, but like in case like you're just listening, master is at 68% structural, 24% supporting, 8% decorative, and 8.5 to 1 signal to noise ratio. Professionals are at a 54% structural, 31% supporting, 15% decorative, and a 3.6 to 1 signal to noise ratio. Advanced is at 41% structural, 33% supporting, 26% decorative, and 1.6 to 1 signal to noise ratio. And amateurs are at 28% structural, 29% supporting, 43% decorative, and the signal to noise ratio is 0.65 to 1. And what this means is that masters have 8.5 units of useful information for every 1 unit of clutter. Almost nothing wasted. Whereas amateurs always have more noise than signal, 0.65 to 1. The drawing is almost always drowning in unnecessary marks. And you know this to be true because, like, you look at normal drawings like a kid would do, it's just a bunch of scribbles. Like, that's literally how we describe bad work. Masters don't draw more. They draw less, but better. They've trained themselves to eliminate everything that doesn't serve clarity. Every line has a job, and if it's not defining form or supporting the structure, it gets cut. And this is exactly what a master barber does. They don't make 47 passes with different cards. They make strategic passes that build the structure. They know which edges to define, the lineup, the part, which to support, the fade gradient, and which to leave alone or soften, areas that would distract from the silhouette. An amateur makes too many passes, creating virtual noise. A master uses precise placement. And this is exactly what a master makeup artist does. They don't use 15 products, they use 5 strategic ones. They know which features to define structural, which to support, contour and highlight, and which to leave alone. Decorative would be distracting. An amateur piles on product everywhere. Blush, bronzer, highlighter, multiple eyeshadow colors, creating visual noise. A master uses precise placement. Masters eliminate 78% more non-structural information than amateurs. This is the fundamental principle of edge decision as information architecture, choosing which edges matter and which ones to have discipline with and to leave everything else out. Edge weight, guiding the eye. But it's not about which lines you include, it's also about how you draw them. Researchers did an eye tracking study where they showed people the same drawing in 3 different versions. Uniform weight, all lines the same thickness, random weight, some bold, some light, but no pattern to it, and hierarchical weight, important structural edges that are bold, and supporting details, light, the way a master would do it. They tracked where people's eyes went and how long it took them to understand the image, whether they remembered it the next day too. The results? All right, once again, we have a table. We have edge treatment, eye fixations, compensation time, and memory retention within 24 hours or a day. On the Y side of the column, we have uniform, random, and hierarchical. So for uniform, we have 47 eye fixations. The comprehension time is 3.8 seconds, and 54% of people remember it the next day. That's just like, with straight lines, you don't really just cut it out. You don't really do too much more to it. With random edge weight, we have 62 eye fixations, 4.9 seconds for comprehension, and 41% of people remember it the next day. That's a drop. And for hierarchical, we have 23 eye fixations, comprehension time of 1.6 seconds, and 81% of people remembered it the next day. When edges had proper hierarchy, bold lines for important structure, light lines for detail, people's eyes made half as many stops, and they understood the image 58% faster, and they remembered it 50% better the next day. Why this matters? Your brain is efficient. It knows what it wants to look at. It wants to know, what should I look at first? And when every line is the same weight, your brain has to work harder to figure out what's important. When there's hierarchy, the artist is doing that work for you. Bold edges say this matters. Light edges say this is secondary. That's why good comic book artists vary line weight. This is why architects use thick lines for walls, thin lines for dimensions. This is why logo designers make the main shape bold and details subtle. This is why skilled barbers create dimension by varying cutting techniques. Some areas get heavier, sharper cuts, structural, while other areas get softer, blended transitions, supporting detail. Proper contrast hierarchy equals 58% faster comprehension. Resolution can't fix bad structure. Now, let's bring this back to digital images and the core argument about resolution versus clarity. Researchers ran an experiment where they showed people two images of the same object. Image A, 1920 by 1080p resolution or standard high definition, but with clean, sharp lines, and image B at 3840 by 2160 resolution or 4K. 4 times the pixels, but with soft, blurry edges. Then they asked which one looks sharper, and the results. We got a table again, guys. We have image, resolution, edge clarity, perceived sharpness, and preference. The Y column, we have image A and image B. 1080p versus 1080p is at clean. Perceived sharpness is at 8.4. Preference is at 84%. Image B is edge quality is soft. Perceived sharpness is at 5.7 out of 10. And preference is at 16%. 4K with poor edge clarity looked worse than half resolution with clear structure. This is proof that resolution is a multiplier, not a source. If underlying image has clear, well-defined edges, resolution can enhance it. But if the structure is vague or the edges are muddy, doubling the resolution just gives you a bigger blur. You're amplifying the confusion at higher fidelity. Or in other words, this is why a 720p video with sharp focus and good contrast feels crisp, while a 4K video shot with a cheap lens through fog feels soft despite having 4 times the pixels. Upscaling a blurry image to 8K doesn't make it sharper. It just adds more pixels to the blurry mess. The mathematical relationship that researchers found. In plain English, clarity contributes 4 times more to perceived quality than resolution does. Doubling your clarity gives you 3.3 times improvement in perceived quality. Doubling your resolution gives you a 1.3 times percent improvement. Clarity wins every time. That mathematical formula is structural clarity raised to the 1.73 power. You put that in parentheses times resolution raised to the 0.42 power. So it's like a correlative on a graph. Like if you could put that in like your T86 kids. This applies to nursing assessments as well. A nurse who can clearly identify which symptoms are critical, structural clarity, will provide better care than one who is overwhelmed by monitoring every possible data point, high resolution and low clarity. The skill is in knowing what matters the most. Optimization beats brute force. Modern graphics don't rely on raw polygon counts anymore. They rely on illusion stacks, normal maps, fake surface detail without adding geometry, baked lighting, pre-calculated light source instead of computing in real time, and LODs or levels of detail. Render distant objects with fewer polygons, and temporal upscaling, using previous frames to guess current frame details, and motion blur, and depth of field, fog, and grain, hide imperfections, and focus attention. Most next-gen visuals are just clever combinations of these tricks rather than raw geometric density. Half-Life 2 is a perfect example. When running optimally, it's a bare bones base with darkness, shaders, and ambiance doing most of the heavy lifting. The game doesn't render what you can't see. It doesn't compute light that doesn't matter. It's effective, and that efficiency is invisible to the player. The GPU price jump from a $300 card to a $1,600 card often buys you higher frame stability, resolution headroom, and ray tracing options, but not a 10x jump in like what your eyes actually register at the moment. Let me take a break, drink some water, guys. Read your own shit. Don't use AI, kids. Cameras past a certain megapixel count. I don't care if you have 1,000 megapixel camera. A 12 megapixel camera with a better lens, better lighting, and technical knowledge will always produce better images. Shout out to the Sony a7S III. Why? Because resolution starts at the lens, not the sensor. If your lens is soft, has chromatic aberration, or low micro contrast, your sensor is just oversampling the blur. You're recording bigger files of the same lack of information. Technical data backs this up. Researchers measured lens performance using something called MTF, or modulation transfer function, or basically how well a lens can reproduce fine detail and contrast. We have another table, guys. It's lens quality, MTF score, effectiveness on 4K sensor. In the X column at the top, in the Y column, we have budget lenses versus professional lenses. MTF score is at 0.45 for the budget lens. Effective resolution is 1728 by 972. That's less than 1080p. And the professional lens is at 0.75, and the effective resolution on the 4K sensor is 2880 by 1620 or near 1440p. A budget lens on a 4K sensor gives an effective 1080p quality image because the lens can't resolve the detail that the sensor is capable of capturing. Meanwhile, a professional lens on a 1080p sensor gives you an effective 1440p equivalent sharpness because the glass is so clean and the contrast is so high. A clean 720p image with good contrast and sharp glass will feel sharper than a muddy 4K image shot through cheap lens optics. Audio gear past clean signal thresholds. At what point can your voice get any crisper? Once you cross the threshold where your recording is clean, no noise floor, no distortion, proper frequency responses, spending another $2,000 on a microphone gets you diminishing returns. Here's we have another table, upgrade path, cost increase, and perceived quality gain in the X column. Y column is $50 USB mic, $200 setup, and an $800 mic. All right, the upgrade path for the $50 mic, maybe you go to a $200 interface and mic. The cost increase is a 300% cost jump, and then the perceived quality gain is at 67%. The upgrade path for the $200 setup to the $800 mic, that's once again a 300% jump in cost, but only a 28% jump in quality. 800 to 3,000, we have a 275% jump in cost, and then that's only an 11% increase in quality. And for room treatments added, that's literally just putting on a pop filter, putting on EVA foam, all like just simple, cheap shit. It's only like $200 normally, and you get a 156% jump in quality. Meanwhile, room treatment, which costs $200 in foam panels and bass traps, like I just said, can improve audio quality by 156% compared to the baseline. The squeeze stops being worth the juice far sooner than the industry wants you to believe. Hair, barbering, and makeup. Product quality versus technique. An $8 drugstore gel in skilled hands will outperform an $80 luxury product used without better understanding. The barber who understands head shape and hair growth, patterns, face shape and proportions, structural clarity, hair texture and how it responds to cutting techniques, which details to emphasize and which details to minimize, will create better results with basic tools than an amateur with a full professional product line. Similarly, makeup application follows the same hierarchy principle we discussed with edge weight. Master makeup artists use fewer products, high signal to noise, focus on structural definition, bone structure, eye shape, and add supporting detail, strategically highlight and subtle contour, and eliminate decorative clutter, unnecessary shimmer, and too many colors. An amateur piles on products everywhere, has no clear hierarchy of what to emphasize, and has decorative percentage, glitter, multiple bright colors, and overblending, and low structural clarity. The result? The amateur's face has high resolution, lots of product, but low clarity. The master's work has perfected clarity with minimal product. Nursing, data versus assessment clarity. A nurse with 20 years more experience and basic monitoring equipment will provide better patient care than a new graduate surrounded by cutting edge technology. Why? Structural clarity in inpatient assessment, which vital signals matter most right now. Structural edges, which symptoms are supporting evidence, supportive detail, and which data points are noise in this content. Decorative information. A master nurse knows how to read a patient, skin color and temperature, breathing patterns and effort, subtle changes in responsiveness, pain indicators beyond the numeric scale. And they've trained themselves to see the signal through the noise of dozens of monitoring parameters. This is edge decision in healthcare, knowing which information defines the patient's current state and which supports your assessment and which can be temporarily ignored. The best nurses optimize. They don't brute force. They don't treat every data point equally. They create hierarchy based on clinical context. Writing. Clarity versus overcomplexity. You want your writing to be smart, layered, and meaningful. You don't want it so complicated that your audience can't follow. There's a difference between hidden depth, like the hedgehog's dilemma in Neon Genesis Evangelion. They only mentioned it once or twice, but it's the entire emotional prevalence of the series. And needless complexity, jargon, nested clauses, obscure references that add friction without meaning. Good writing has clarity first, with depth available to those who look closer. Budgets. Effectiveness versus weight. Municipal budgets, film budgets, and marketing budgets. How many products cost 10 times more than what they should have, but then yield scalable results? I immediately think of bloated city infrastructure projects spending millions on cosmetic changes to public spaces that don't improve function or safety or community use. The Jackson Street Pier in Sandusky is a prime example. Beautiful, expensive, and underutilized. Another example is Rahm Emanuel's outsourcing of Chicago's parking meters to a private company. The stated goal was efficiency, but it cost the city millions while providing minimal benefit to residents and maximum benefits to private shareholders. Production value past meeting. With AI-generated content flooding every single platform, production value is losing its meaning. When anyone can generate a slick-looking video, polished image, or a clean voiceover in minutes, audiences stop associating high production value with effort or expertise. The old gatekeeping model, you need a studio, a team, expensive equipment, is collapsing in real time. And that's good for access, but it also means quality and intent matter more than ever because technical polish is now table stakes. The expert tax. At one point, you're paying 10 times more for a 5% gain that only experts notice. My photography example. As of 2026, I charge $80 for one photograph or two for $100. That's not just for the image, it's for technical knowledge, knowing how to use light, composition, lens choice, and timing, understanding that a professional lens matters more than megapixel count. It's for direction, coaching the subject into natural, confident poses. Sometimes the subject's friends are there and nobody can focus. So I have to establish clear boundaries to ensure that we get usable images. The subject has to be ready and look good. If I get the technical aspects right, but they're not prepared, the photos won't work. It's optimization, establishing a protective chain of custody over what I'm creating, not releasing the work until a subject matter is aligned and relevant, factoring in overhead costs, equipment breakage, and the reality that I might not book a session when I need one financially. It's for delivering images that persist, not just trend fuel that gets likes for a week. And here's the reality. A pretty girl with big boobs and a big butt doesn't need me to get likes. She can post a selfie quick and rack up engagement. But 6 months later, 6 years later, that photo is gone, forgotten. It was trend fuel, not a lasting image. The quality photographs I take persistent. The quality photographs that I take persist. People come back to them. They print them. They use them for years. They look on Google Images years later instead of degrading in quality as technology increases. I also teach clients how to optimize their own shots, even if they're working with a friend instead of hiring me. Take your time. Compose your shot. Use natural light. Make it beautiful. Quality stands for itself. Trend photos fade. The teenage engineering example. Consider the fact that the teenage engineering OP1 field, a beautiful functional production device that costs $2,000. It's genuinely well designed and works amazingly, but you can achieve 90% of its functionality with a $300 MIDI controller and some free software. The $1,700 difference buys you premium build quality, integrated workflow, aesthetic appeal, and brand prestige. For professionals who use it daily, that might be worth it. For most people, it's the expert tax, paying 10x times more for refinement that only experts will fully appreciate. This pricing exists to create sticker shock and controversy, but it's also because the device proves it's possible to create at this quality level. The question becomes, will they scale up production to make it accessible or maintain scarcity and premium positioning? Other companies can enter the market with scaled alternatives if teenage engineering doesn't. It's the same pattern as Beats by Dre in headphones or JBL versus Audio-Technica in studio monitoring. Sometimes you're paying for sound quality. Sometimes you're paying for the logo. Why this matters now. We're living in an era where hardware prices are exploding. GPUs, cameras, production equipment costs more than ever. Content quality is plateauing. The visual difference between 2018 and 2024 video games and video in general is marginal. Optimization is treated as unsexy. Brute force and raw specs are easier to market than efficiency. And industries need you to believe that you can't create without massive infrastructure. Universal Pictures, Paramount, Adobe, and Apple, these companies need you to think that you can't make something worthwhile with your phone, your laptop, and your $200 microphone. But you can. The tools have been democratized and decentralized. What hasn't been democratized and decentralized is the knowledge, taste, and intent. And that is actually what matters. We can take the music industry back, guys. Understand me, hear my plea. The core rule. This is the spine. Skill optimization and intent outperform raw specs far sooner than what people want to admit. When clarity comes first, low resolution feels rich, abstraction feels real, and immersion happens naturally. Simple tools produce professional results. And when clarity is missing, high resolution feels hollow, realism feels fake, and immersion collapses. Expensive tools produce amateur results. Drawing to rendering to clarity. Let's take a step back and think about this from the first principles. Drawing is the original rendering engine. When an artist draws, they're doing the same job a 3D renderer does, the same job a barber does shaping a fade, the same job a nurse does triaging symptoms, deciding which edges matter, deciding where contrast belongs, and deciding what information to discard. A good drawing doesn't feel high resolution because it has more lines. It feels high resolution because nothing important is unclear. That's a rule. Everything else inherits. Resolution is downstream of clarity. In both art and computation, resolution is a multiplier, not a source. If the underlying structure is vague, more pixels amplify confusion, more polygons amplify noise, and more detail amplifies falseness. The product creates mud, more monitoring obscures critical signals. That's why a charcoal sketch can feel more real than a photograph. A low poly model can read better than a dense one. A 720p image with clear images can feel sharper than muddy 4K. And a simple makeup look with a clear structure beats elaborate decoration. And an experienced nurse with basic tools outperforms a novice with advanced tech. The renderer can only refine what is already legible. Content creation and the teaching angle. I'm not against AI being utilized. I use AI. I'm not against any company in particular, short of what they fund secretly and how they might co-opt against you to do what they deem as the most good, as discussed in my previous book on AI. I'm against the process replacing human involvement entirely because AI alone is unsatisfactory for accomplishing the nuanced tasks that create meaning. Without people who know how to perform, without people who know how to compose a shot, direct a performance, write with clarity and intent, mix audio with purpose, and optimize a render pipeline, cut hair with understanding of face shape, apply makeup with structural clarity, assess a patient with clinical judgment, voice act, and promote efficiently, this knowledge will eventually be lost and will be left with algorithms trained on the output of algorithms, generation after generation, drifting further from human intent. And my proof of this prediction is where like you see those funny AI compilations where it's like you ask AI to render out a video up until redraw a picture. Like AI always, like whenever you put a picture in and ask it to edit it, it like redraws it. And then like you do this hundreds of times and you get a unrecognizable, disgusting or unclear image. That's the exact same thing that's going to happen to music, content, art, life, and reality if we let AI take our brains. We can